my dad would call it the Church of Fifth and Bedpost. That was his kind of quip for somebody who had faith, they had religion, they believed in God, but they didn't show up to church on Sunday. What they were doing on Sunday morning instead was sleeping in, hence, they attended the Church of Fifth and Bedpost. Now, on this podcast, we have definitely talked about tons of reasons why somebody might not want to show up to church. We've talked about Christian nationalism and church abuse and all the different things that churches absolutely get wrong. But this show is not just deconstruction, it is also reconstruction. We truly don't want people to abandon the church, abandon the faith for good. Even if, yeah, there are some not so great expressions of Christian community out there in the world. We want to point out the problems without having to ditch the entire enterprise. And as we talk about today, it is the firm belief here, the official position, if you will, of Christianity without compromise, that church still matters. Now, I have a special guest, a returning guest today. Loren Richmond Jr. is back on Christianity Without Compromise. He last joined us on episode 4, so it has been quite a while. He's a pastor, chaplain, ministry consultant, nonprofit leader. He's also the host of the Future Christian podcast, and he holds an MDiv from Phillips Theological Seminary and an MBA with a nonprofit focus from Hope International University. So with experience ranging from food pantry director to founding pastor and everything in between, Loren brings us a very grounded and expansive view of the church's role in society to help us explore why the local church still matters, even for those disillusioned with institutions. Welcome to Christianity Without Compromise. I'm your host, Jake Doberenz, and in each episode we focus on Jesus alone, and not the other idols we put in his place. Now let's start smashing those idols. Loren, thank you so much for coming back for round 2. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to this conversation.
You're also just a cool guy and somebody I would consider a friend as well. So I'm privileged to have met you IRL, right, in real life, over a unintentional layover in your home city. So that was nice to get to meet you in person, and we've connected online for a long time somehow or another. I honestly couldn't even tell you the origin story at this point, but one way or another we got connected, and so it's been great, and I'm excited for this conversation because I think you have a really good, unique perspective on this, and you read all the books, and you have worked in the church and in the nonprofit space and everything in between, and so I think you're the right person to help us tackle today, like, what's with church? Why does that still matter? And of course, this is a conversation in some way, shape, or form you have on your own podcast, so you're quite knowledgeable. Well, I want to talk about your history with church. Now, I know you are the son of a pastor, and so I assume you've been pretty involved in church probably for like your whole life. Having become a pastor yourself, church has kind of been a part of the picture the whole time. But tell me, like, did you have any rebellious pastor's kid years? Have you ever been disillusioned with the church? Talk to us kind of about your church journey.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have any good, like, pastor's kid rebellious stories. Like, I've always been so, like, trying to be a good person, trying to be a good Christian, that I never had a serious, like, big rebellious streak. And I think part of that is, like, my dad was not actively involved in ministry during my teenage years. So I think that's a lot of the times when kids or young, teenagers really have like a rebellious kind of fallout from churches, because they're they're in this time where they're going through a big time of, where rebelliousness is sort of a natural developmental progression. Plus they're old enough to see all, like, kind of how all the sausage is made, and like see all the people being people in church. So like I was fortunate to not have to see a lot of that. Certainly I have some I suppose childhood trauma, if we can use that word, that I've had to unpack certainly in later life. Also, like, I think I've never really had a big falling away. Certainly when I went through a time of deconstruction, like I checked out of church for a little bit. I think if I can be so bold, I think I'd say like I'm still disillusioned with church, if that's not too strong
Sure.
to say. Like, and I don't want to overstate my disillusionment, but I mean, for better or worse, and I'm not sure it's better, I do worry that sometimes it is worse, that like I have this disillusionment with church. Like I'm attending a church that's not within the tradition in which I'm ordained. So I think that speaks to some level of disillusionment. And again, there's some complications there which we may or may not get into. But yeah, I think there's some, it's minor. Like I don't have any good dramatic rebellious stories, I guess I'd say.
That's okay. We don't always need dramatic rebellious stories. It's probably good that you didn't do anything too crazy, but
Right.
that contextualizes some things. And I'm glad you admitted to being disillusioned, even now. That I think is good framing for the whole conversation here. You're
Right.
coming at this from an honest place. I'm at a church right now that I pretty much disagree with on most theological points, and that's where you're at. And um, when I first came on your podcast way back when, I'll find it, I'll throw in the show notes. When I was on the Future Christian podcast, I talked about working at a church that didn't always
Mm-hmm.
jive with my theology, right? So I have had all those disillusioned time and still trying to figure out the well, I'm not naive enough to look for the perfect church, but still trying to figure out where do I fit, where do I belong, where's the right place. So,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
thanks for sharing all that. That again, that contextualizes everything. Now, this show is not really for atheists or like anti-Christian people. Which, if you're listening to this, I guess hello, glad you're here, I suppose. But we are talking about Christians today. We're talking about Christians who maybe just don't find the whole church gathering thing something that they really want to participate in. They're not doing that for whatever reason. Um, and I wanted to ask you, like, this is a widespread issue, conservatives, progressives. What are some of the reasons you hear for why Christians are just saying, I'm checking out. I don't want to go back to church. Maybe that has to do with leaving faith, but maybe that just is leaving kind of the institution. So what do you hear are these reasons or excuses, if you want to put a slightly more negative spin on it?
Yeah, so I want to bring in, you mentioned me reading a lot, and I'm just started the book Why Religion Went Obsolete by Christian Smith, a
Oh
sociologist.
yeah, I love Christian
And
Smith.
I'm
Yeah.
about, I don't know, a quarter of the way in. So he does talk about he uses the word six imminent goods that they believe religion ought to deliver. So morals, positive psychology, getting along, modeling, moderation, and to some extent national solidarity. So Smith in the book, and I think this is true writ large, based on what I've heard, and then also some of the quotations he shares from interviews with folks, is Americans aren't getting these things from church like anymore, or at least I would say it differently. I think they can get these things elsewhere. So, I mean, I think the most cliche answer I remember hearing all the time, even when I was in running in more conservative circles, was like, I can get, like, I don't need, I connect with God in nature is something I hear. I feel like we've heard forever, or like I can do fine with my relationship with God of my own. Not necessarily untrue, right? Um, so I think there's been this, and I would certainly want to. question the premise of whether religion or Christianity in this specific should be simply about like these imminent goods of morals and positive psychology and getting along. But I think this is the fundamental challenge because because we boiled Christianity and religion down to good morals and positive psychology and getting along with one another, like because that's what we've reduced Christianity to in some ways. People are realizing like, hey, I can get this elsewhere. Like I can get this in sports with my kids. I can get this in other resources.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. Um, I've talked before about how when I was really into CrossFit, which is kind of a cult. Let's be honest, like that gave me some of that community and encouragement and accountability and all those kind of those goods.
So,
So yeah, it's very fair. Yeah.
and if I can add one more thought here too, like I don't know how I don't necessarily know how much like I want to explore this in this conversation, right? But let me just say, like I've been through some stuff in church, so like for listeners, like understand, like I've been through some stuff, church hurt, like all that stuff. Like I've been through some stuff. Like just trust me on this. And about 6 months, 9 months ago, like one of the folks on staff at the church I attend was like, Loren, I really appreciate that you come because like I know you've seen how the sausage is made. So like I've seen how the sausage is made. So let me just say that. And two, I think like the other side of this is like when we assume that church or Christianity or religion is simply about like morals or positive psychology. If we feel like we're not getting that from church, it's like peace out, I'm good. So like, and perhaps we'll get it more into this. Like I would say like church is meant to be more than just about morals and positive psychology and moderation.
Yes, and we will get into that, and that's absolutely fair to say. Like Christian Smith, he's a sociologist, right? He's coming from that
Right.
particular angle, and he's an interesting one. I wrote a paper talking about some of his moralistic therapeutic deism work back when that was a thing in like the early 2000s. But um, yeah, he's coming at it from a very particular angle, and that's kind of like there is a lot of like I guess social good in religion. Like you could point to all the stats, you could look at all the statistics, sure, but church is more than that, and we will get to that in a little bit here. Um, but I want to dive into one particular kind of reason you said. You talked about this kind of like I have my own relationship with God. I have my own personal relationship. I hear this a lot. Um, I remember the first time I heard it from a friend of mine who just said, "Well, I don't need church because I can read my Bible." Nowadays, you could say, "Hey, I can listen to that podcast or turn on the Bible Project video or whatever." Like, sure, there are ways to engage with Christian content and things solo. Um, so, kind of, what do you say in response to somebody that throws down that particular card? Like, you can kind of talk about the gains and the losses of that particular view.
Yeah. Again, I wouldn't necessarily disagree with someone. I think podcasts and YouTube and all these ways we have to consume media these days are great ways to for personal piety or devotion, like even like the paper version of the Daily Bread or some kind of devotional, like that's a similar type concept is the individual aspect of faith. So certainly wouldn't want to diminish or dismiss these things, but I believe like Christianity is about love of God and love of neighbor. So I think this is something that is fundamentally like must be practiced in community.
I mean, yeah, that's the that's the simple answer to it. Community is complicated and comes with people with personalities and as you have said, I like your phrasing. Like you see how the sausage is made. It's
Right.
messy. It's not great. You don't really want to know what's in sausage. It might scare you a little bit, but Yeah,
So,
there's something important in
so
community.
let me give you an example, and I'll try to use generics here because this is kind of a situation that I'm sort of involved with, but I imagine our listeners here won't necessarily cross paths with my context. But like, I I'm involved in a small group at my church, and there's some personality conflict. I guess is the way that we can say it gently. So there's this idea of like, well, let's just like sort of keep doing this small group, but also like go start our own like special special other for small group. And I was like, oh, this is and I heard about this. I was like, oh, this is not a good idea. Like this is not like from even just basically from a from like a family systems theory perspective, but I just don't think it's a good Christian perspective. So I think that's a like it is hard. Like it's hard to be in community with people. Like it's hard, and I think like that's the point because I believe again following the way of Jesus is about self-sacrifice, service to others, and like to do that, to literally do that, it means we have to like put ourselves around people we don't like. Like that's like it's easy to like didn't Jesus say something like it's easy to love I'm forgetting the actual exact quote, but it's easy to love and to pray for those people we like. Like the people we don't like, that's where it's real hard.
For sure. Yeah, exactly. As I think you said, like, yeah, even the Gentiles, they don't have a problem loving and caring for their BFFs. Like,
Right.
sure, but loving enemies, things like that, that's radical and that's
Right.
way harder. And it's true. Like, um, growing up, I would tell my parents this because I was a little bit of a rebellious teenager. Let's be real. I would tell them that I was the foremost expert on myself. My parents would
Mm-hmm.
say, "You need to do this. This would be good for you." And I would say, "I don't think so. I'm the expert on myself." But as I grew up, I realized I have blind spots. I'm actually not the foremost expert on myself. Like, yeah, I mean, I literally know what's in my noggin and what I'm thinking about right now,
Right.
yet nobody can actually read my mind. But other people have unique perspectives. They have unique trainings or experiences that can speak into my life and make connections that I just simply cannot. Um, that's why I loved being, getting my bachelor's and master's degrees and all that fun stuff. It's being around all these smart people with different perspectives, be like, whoa, that's amazing and stuff like that. It's the same reason I
Right.
think we
Right.
need the church. Even though people have takes that I'm like, I don't agree with that at all, but it's still there's still some value in community
And that
in
gets into
being
like
with
a
those other
bigger
people.
kind of cultural milieu that is certainly something that the church writ large is like swimming quite upstream against is this kind of cultural value that like the individual is the highest authority, like that we are our own expert, that we really alone like have the answers that we need within ourselves. And Christianity like fundamentally says quite the opposite. It says we can't save ourselves, that we need outside help. So it makes sense that church is struggling right now. Like it's not a mystery in some ways.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I'm glad you brought up individualism because that does seem to be a particular challenge and one day I want to do a whole research project, a book or something that kind of wrestles with this tension between individualism and like kind of those ultra collectivist societies, like where are
Mm-hmm.
we supposed to be, because it is really hard because I'm swimming in individualism right now. um, and I'm a little bit of an anti-authoritarian type. I don't like people telling me what to do, and so that's real fun in these various church settings or in any kind of setting where, fun fact, somebody tells me what to do. And so it's a really awkward tension, but again, there is something beneficial about being in the community, about being in the church. And maybe you could speak more to that, like help us make the case for church, more than just the sociological reasons.
I mean,
Why?
I
Why
think
show
we should.
up?
I think we should even start with the sociological reasons. Like like for all the things that ail our culture right now, like church is sociologically like the answer. Like when we talk about relationships, when we talk about greater trust, when we think about like well-being and happiness, like the data is pretty clear that like folks who go to church have stronger personal relationships, well-being, trust, happiness, and fulfillment. Like just from a personal well-being thing, like you should go to church. Like just show up and go to church. Like it's gonna be good for you. Not even just like your well-being, but also like your economic status. Frankly, like the connection you're gonna make there are probably gonna be better for you in your socioeconomic situation. I think more spiritually speaking, though, I think there's something. I think church is really about formation, and I was just working on I just published something actually today on Substack, talking about listening to a podcast that I produced for an Episcopal group, and it was highlighting two young adults who were talking about how they feel like their tradition in this instance the Episcopal tradition had formed them. Now they didn't use those strong words, but listening to it, I was thinking about like um, the liturgy, the worship, they're attending church, like that had formed them and how they live out and how they practice daily life and faith. Certainly, I was thinking about this in context to the late Tim Keller, having recently read his book How to Reach the West, in which Keller talks about a moral ecology and how like a moral ecology answers questions like who is good, what is good, how do I be good in daily life. Like church answers these questions for us and gives us ultimate values and ultimate purpose for how to navigate. And I think like again, we're living in this time and place and culture where like we are tasked with the responsibility or authority of like deciding all that for ourselves. And again, like this is like the paradox of choice, right? Like we think like, oh, this is a great idea. Like I want to be my own boss. Like I want to make my own decisions, but really like that's exhausting. It's frankly exhausting. And like we need some sort of greater values or guidelines to root us and to ground us. Because when I'm like, it's great and all when I'm like, yeah, hey, I'm my own boss, to kind of use like an entrepreneurial word, right? Like I'm the master of my domain, or like the king of my castle, wherever. Like I set my own agenda. And I mean that's great when we're vibing and feeling confident, but when when stuff hits the fan, like when things are really out of control, like then like we're not feeling that confidence. Like we're not posting on Instagram about how great our life is. Like that's when we need something rather than to have to like invent our own like our own kind of psych up tape. Like we need something to root and ground ourselves in that tells us that like life is more than just about like good vibes and material success.
Yeah. Um, I never, until becoming kind of a solopreneur, if you will, before becoming my own boss, I never realized how like kind of ADHD I was, and how like difficult it is to get stuff done. I'll work on something for 20 minutes, and then it's the next 20 minutes something else, and then it's kind of crazy. So that analogy spoke to me for sure, because sometimes I need some structure, I need some other people with me, and in something so complex as spiritual life, like yeah, all the more. Well, let's get some other people helping us out here, as well as for all the social good benefits that you mentioned there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the things that churches do, or supposed to, I suppose, are do good for the community, for the world, from missions to advocating for good policies and positions to helping clothe or house the unhoused people on the streets. Like, obviously the church is supposed to do that. Now, not every church does that super great, and I have a little bit of
Mm-hmm.
a soapbox here because in my own church journey, my quest to find a church that I felt was um, that honored God not just in word but also in those deeds, I ended up in some quote unquote progressive church spaces. And I'm not trying to make a generalization here. I'm just pointing out my particular observations. Some of those more progressive spaces were so focused on the political advocacy, the social good, great stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
I found kind of the focus on Jesus or theology or kind of the sacraments. I found that lacking in some of those spaces, and they just turned into kind of grassroots political gatherings or activist social clubs that, yeah, maybe sang a few churchy songs here and there. So, um, bringing in your experience here, like back on episode 4 when you were first on the show, you talked about social entrepreneurship, and you talked specifically about how churches can do that. So I don't know. Can you just kind of help us balance here, like what's an appropriate way to balance like spiritual needs and kind of positively impact the world? Because it just seems like, man, we are stuck in that pendulum swing.
Mm-hmm.
It's either all about the spiritual needs or all about the world. Um, Again, not saying there's no church that does it well, but maybe how, I don't know. What's your take on this? How can we do it well?
Yeah, I think I'm trying to find a book here that comes to mind. First of all, I think there is this pendulum swing that you certainly speak about. Second of all, I think there's this kind of like unfair cliche that to be centrist or to be a middle ground is dab smack in the middle. So I think there does need, like, when we think about like being in between, just pure social justice versus pure like spirituality of like it's going to heaven and that's all that Christianity is about. Like, I think it is important to be in between or balance between those two poles. I think it's important to understand like that's not going to be like dead set 50-50 like in the middle. There's going to be some variation depending on what the cultural context and in larger contextual situation is. So they're like, don't like be okay being in the middle and reevaluating it and being nuanced, and like don't like recognize like just because you're seeking middle ground doesn't mean like you're trying to split the two perfectly, if that makes sense. Like, I think when we think about, oh, I'm trying to
Yeah.
be middle ground, it's seen as a cop out of like I'm trying to split the two perfectly, and I don't think that's a accurate sociologically, because most centrists aren't like truly like, oh, I'm just trying to be central. Like, certainly some people are, but I just don't think that's true sociologically of like what most people who are middle ground are. Like, they'll hold some views that are more left, to, again, they use the political spectrum. They'll hold some views that are more right. They'll kind of be in, they're not they're not seeking just to be 50-50 down the middle. And if you are, I think that's a problem. Uh, Conversely, I'm reminded of this book, Sustaining While Disrupting, that written by Doug Poe and Lovett Weems, two Methodists. And I'm trying to find the quote, but they basically talk about how that in church we kind of stop short of like the so that, like, to use what's his name, Simon Sinek's like the why. So they use the example of like starting a youth ministry so that youth will have a place to gather. Like, that's a great why, but that's not the ultimate why. Like, the ultimate why is like, we want to, they use example, we will do all our ministry in such a way so that increasing numbers of youth worship, study, serve, and build relationships to support their growth as disciples of Jesus Christ. So I think that's really like the why has to be fully formed or fully completed. Like, understand that I believe, again, a mission of a church is not just to feed people or see like tangible needs met. Like, I think these are important aspects of how we live out our faith and like practice the love and grace of God. But I believe that like our ultimate purpose is to see people become disciples, followers of Jesus, and to increase their faith. So there's going to have to be some like hard decisions made at times, and that's why I think having that ultimate why is important, because like the reality is like there comes a time for organizations and institutions where like you have to make hard decisions around like what like resources do become a challenge. So making sure like what is our ultimate purpose is going to be important when the rubber hits the road.
Yeah, and I know that's something that you do as kind of this nonprofit consultant, church consultant, ministry consultant, is to help them avoid mission creep, right? Because
Right.
it is so important to get that mission clear. Big fan of mission statements and stuff like that personally. And that's that matrix that helps you make those important decisions and stay on track and stuff. So
Absolutely.
yeah, that's yeah. Thanks for taking us through that. I mean, it's not easy. It's not like you said, like, all right, 50% goes here, 50% goes there. It's
Right.
complicated. Um, but it is my personal soapbox a little bit that I'm worried that churches that are doing really good things, stuff I'm not against, but when I show up to those spaces, I don't. I also want Jesus, and I want the sacraments. I want the life of faith together, and not just okay. What's the next protest we're going to? What's the
Right.
next policy we're going to advocate for, or something like that? Or how do we get out the vote? Okay, but church is more. It's more than that. That's maybe one way to live that out, but it's more
And
than that.
if I can tag on here, and I know
Absolutely.
we're kind of running long on time, but I'm thinking
Yeah.
about
Okay.
Andrew Root, who I've really become a fan of his work. In one of his books, he talks about like having that the real why or the real focus of the foundational piece really helps things not kind of go offline or stay unfocused. So in one of his books, he talks about um, like we do justice work. You know, we feed the poor not because we think we can solve all the issues, but because like we're testifying, like this is how God wants it to be. Like this is how God is ultimately going to make it. Like it's not like he uses example of like Lazarus still died. Like when Jesus rose or brought Lazarus back to life, like Lazarus still died. Like when he fed the 5,000, those 5,000 were still hungry tomorrow. Like the next day, they were still hungry. Like Jesus didn't do it because he's like, oh, I got to solve these problems for these people. Like he's doing it. He was doing it to say, like, I am the resurrection and the life. Like, you who believe in me, though you may die will live. You who eat of what I eat will never be hungry. And I'm kind of amalgamating text there together. But like again, like if our focus is on like we're not doing this because we're trying to fix everything or we believe that we can fix everything, we're doing it because we're testifying to what we believe to be true about God, demonstrated in Jesus, and what has been and what will be true.
Well, I had on my imaginary Loren Richmond Jr. bingo card that you were going to mention Andrew Root. So excellent. Um,
I'd been good.
all
I'd
yeah.
been good up to that point.
No, it's good. It's good. Um, I'll say, might have to cut this out later. Hopefully, he will be on the show soon. There's some things in the works there, but not sure. But he has a book coming out next year that is a good fit. So
Yeah, awesome.
maybe. Um, but awesome. I do want to kind of close the main question portion here with um talk about some just kind of practices here, get a little practical.
Yeah.
Um, what kind of suggestions do you give a believer that's struggling to kind of re-engage with church, or people walking into a new church community, or in evaluating a church community? Like, kind of anything you want to speak to here. Give us one or two sort of suggestions on how to, okay, get involved with the church.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing you just gotta like do it. I just have become convinced that
Yes.
life is just about habits, like that doing things. Now, obviously, there's gonna be some like figuring out what your kind of like non-negotiables are. Like I had some non-negotiables that were important to me that really kind of helped me filter like the most non-controversial or let me say it this way, like the most obvious of my non-negotiables. Like I want something good for my kids. Like I wanted children's programming that was going to meet them where they're at and also like provide some biblical foundation for them. So like to me that was like something that I really was looking for, probably number one almost in a church. So like that was going to naturally kind of root out like some small churches that are doing good ministry work and otherwise I might consider, but like that was just a value that I had. So I think one is, again, kind of get in the habit of trying to make church a thing in your life. Two is maybe prior, I should reverse these, but figure out what your kind of ultimate non-negotiables are. Like, this is not a non-negotiable for me, but if you're like, I really want to, like, I don't know, like sing praise and worship, like contemporary music, like, I mean, worship styles it's a whole nother conversation. But again, these are just some examples. Figure out what your non-negotiables are, and then, like, show up and say hello to someone. I think that's it. Like, try to say hello to someone. Like, I know, like, I'm an introvert, so like that's not like the first thing I love to do is walk up to some stranger. But I remember when I was a kid, like my dad would always talk to people, and I always found it like so weird and annoying. Like, even as a teenager, like, Dad, why are you talking to strangers? And now I've just started doing the same thing because I realized, like, I feel better about life when I talk to random people. They're just like and I think, like, sociologically, like, isn't it better for our nation, for our communities, when we can be friendly with people? So yeah, like, I'll put those in correct order. Like, figure out what your non-negotiables are, make it a get you know make it a habit, and amongst that habit, you're probably gonna have to do some like micro habits of like figuring out what you want to wear the next day, setting your alarm clock, things like that. And then, and three, like, try to say hello to someone.
Yeah, I mean, you're right that it just kind of comes down to a lot just showing up,
Mm-hmm.
trying, getting involved. I always find like, sign me up for a ministry as fast as I can. I start to get to know people, people get to know me. And I also am, I was raised by two extroverted parents, and I'm kind of ish on the more introverted side. I can, I fake people out. They think I'm an
Mm-hmm.
extrovert.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I always found if I am like doing a task or in charge of something or have a purpose, it's way easier. So,
Yeah.
um, just walking into a sanctuary, it's gonna be hard for me to say hi to somebody. But if you make me the greeter or the guy that passes out the bulletins, if anybody does that anymore, I don't know if that's a thing or whatever. Like, just get me involved. It's so much better. So
Right.
yeah, yeah, I love that. Well, now's the part of the show where we talk about what you're up to, Loren, and all your various projects and wherever you kind of want to point people to. So just take the time, give us those plugs and links.
Yeah. So I'd love for folks to check out my podcast, Future Christian. Find it everywhere podcasts are. I also blog at Substack at the Church Nerd. And then I don't think we'll have an answer yet on this, Jake, maybe by December when this comes out. Hopefully we'll have a book coming published here. It's still very TBD as far as
Yeah.
specifics. So we'll see if there's more specifics to give. So if you
Wh-
can, follow my Substack and podcast,
yes,
and you'll hear more about those other projects.
that's what I was going to say. Follow those things. Absolutely. Um, we mentioned your show. You mentioned your show on this show before. Hopefully, people know about it and have checked that out. Got some really good conversations with very interesting people. So great. Well, Lauren, the real final question that everybody gets asked every single time since the beginning of the show, I think, um, is this: as we close, leave the audience with just one practical action they can do this week to live out their faith fully for Jesus.
That's a big question. Yeah.
That's why I say it for the end.
Well, so many things that come to mind. Let me frame it this way, perhaps, because I think this has been like something that's been like, change starts with us. Like, uh, so I live in the suburbs. So next door, for folks who live in the suburbs, probably have next door. Next door is like the worst social media there is. It's just like neighbors complaining against neighbors. I've started posting like fun things on Nextdoor. Like, I was out running like last week, and like some like puppies came up and 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 were chasing me, which was like a hilarious experience after like when I went over to greet them like a month ago prior, like someone like I got a flat tire and some dude like showed up in a truck when I was on the side of the road and like, here, throw your truck in the, so I posted that next door. Like, we have a choice in like what we share. Like, we can choose to share negative, but also like we can look for opportunities to share good that is happening. And this is more like, I suppose, a generic kind of moral thing, but I think this applies to like our faith. Like, we can like we can look at all the bad that's happening, or like if we can shift our mindset, we can say like, maybe God is at work in my life, maybe God is at work in my community, maybe God is at work in our church.
I like that one. That's actually really interesting. Yeah. Yeah, put some good out in the world, guys. Like there is good. It just doesn't always have the best marketing PR team behind it.
Right,
So
right.
help it out a little bit. Help it out. Beautiful.
And yeah, if I can jump on this too, like I was
Of
listening to a
course.
podcast and they're making the point like the algorithms are unnaturally promoting discord and vitriol. Like, that's not, we think there's so much vitriol and outrage in our world. Like, the algorithms are promoting that because they know we'll engage, but it's not like, it's not how they would naturally like get out in real life. So it messes with our brain, and that's why we have to work harder to share those good stuff.
100%. 100%. Excellent. Well, that's all for today. I do always end with a sharing challenge. Somebody for the listeners to share this episode with because you enjoyed it. Awesome. Great. Love it. Now tell somebody else about it because you loved it. And a great person to think of this time would be maybe talk to your kind of deconstructing Christian brother or sister who is just maybe disillusioned with church, maybe doesn't know if they want to step back into those church doors. I'm not saying one episode is going to convince them, is going to point them in the right direction, but hey, this is a great encouragement for anybody that has feelings like both of us, a little bit of that disillusionment, but hey, we still recognize there is some good here. There is some reasons church still matters. So that is a great kind of person. If somebody comes to mind, share this episode with them. That would be awesome. So, Loren Richmond Jr., thank you so much for being on Christianity Without Compromise. I always appreciate talking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Christianity Without Compromise. We just had a great episode, and I encourage you to put into practice the wisdom and advice that you received. Please subscribe to the podcast and newsletter at jakedoberenz.substack.com. That way, right in your inbox, every Tuesday you'll receive the new episode, and on Fridays you'll receive a newsletter written by me that tells a funny or interesting story with a spiritual point. This episode was recorded by me, Jake Doberenz, in conjunction with Theophany Media, my podcast production company. Please rate and review the show on your favorite podcast player, and don't forget to share your favorite episodes with your friends and your enemies. Thank you so much for all your support, and we look forward to bringing you another great episode next week.